AOC says so many people in this country hate women. Oh, geez. Even the guy at the party who pulls out a guitar is like, way to ruin the fun. And who do you see on the horizon for 2028 in the Democratic primary?
Right now?
Yeah.
Bernie and AOC.
No.
They got the biggest crowds.
That doesn't matter.
It won't sustain itself, but right now they have no lead.
Bill Maher just stepped into a debate that many Democratic commentators would rather avoid. Can the party's most visible progressive voices actually build a national majority? Social media can turn a political figure into a superstar overnight, but presidential politics operates on a much tougher playing field. A viral moment may dominate the internet for a weekend, while a national campaign demands answers from skeptical voters, difficult interviews, and Americans who rarely follow political content online. Maher's broader argument is straightforward. Excitement matters, but excitement that never expands beyond the base can create a loyal audience without creating a governing coalition. And once the numbers enter the conversation, some uncomfortable questions become impossible to ignore.
Parts of the same party. I mean, they are obviously in a coalition together, but people who are Democratic socialists make that distinction. They say, I am a Democratic socialist. That's Bernie Sanders, that's Mondami, that's the mayor of Seattle, a number of them.
And so far, it plays in big cities, but there's no evidence yet that you can take that outside of major metro cores in this country. Look, Bernie Sanders is 0 for 2 running for president.
That line cuts through the mythology. Bernie did not lose. This is where political slogans run into actual election math. Some progressive candidates have presented the same message to voters more than once, and voters have had opportunities to choose them without delivering the victories their supporters expected. That does not erase their influence on issues such as wages, healthcare, education, and the cost of living. But political influence and national electability are two very different measures of success. One can produce packed rallies and enthusiastic applause. The other has to produce enough votes across an entire country to win the presidency. The progressive movement cannot simply assume that online enthusiasm represents a majority that has been waiting quietly to appear.
Well, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mondami are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're Democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
Now the conversation moves from campaign slogans to the spreadsheets behind them, and spreadsheets are far less forgiving than a catchy political phrase. Universal health coverage can be a legitimate and serious objective, but the difficult question is always how the government intends to pay for it. Vermont became an important example of how complicated that calculation can become when ambitious coverage plans meet real-world financing concerns. The experience does not demonstrate that healthcare reform cannot work. It demonstrates that promising broad benefits is only the beginning of the conversation. Voters eventually want to know the price, the funding mechanism, and what the final system will actually look like.
Reporting how much Latinos despise the woke term Latinx. It's about as popular with them as a reboot of Speedy Gonzales. Even the country's oldest Latino civil rights group came out against it, yet AOC keeps defending it, saying gender is fluid, language is fluid. Yes, and Latino voters are fluid. And more of them now than ever are identifying as Republicans.
That joke points toward a much larger political problem. Sometimes movements create labels for communities and then become frustrated when those communities do not embrace them. When voters reject a political identity being placed on them, lecturing them rarely changes their minds. Political coalitions are built through listening, not by insisting that people use the terminology consultants or activists prefer. If a label has more support inside campaign meetings than among the actual voters being described, the smarter response is not to defend the presentation slide. It is to reconsider the message and pay attention to what those voters are actually saying.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is a, this is, of course, a very long-standing policy of the United States.
Oh, my Lord. That was at the Munich Security Conference months ago, ladies and gentlemen. That means she flew overseas to tackle a subject she knew she was going over there to tackle, knowing the question that was going to be asked, and that was her response. What am I missing?
This is the moment when a social media personality gets tested against the much harsher demands of presidential leadership. Online, a thoughtful pause can be interpreted as confidence or careful consideration. During a serious national security discussion, that same hesitation can create an entirely different impression. Taiwan, foreign policy, and international security are not subjects a presidential contender can treat like casual trivia. Candidates need a clear framework before they reach the stage. Allies pay attention to their words, adversaries study their weaknesses, and political opponents archive every uncertain answer. A single uncomfortable clip can survive for years, and no amount of follower engagement can make it disappear.
AOC says so many people in this country hate women. Oh, geez. Even the guy at the party who pulls out a guitar is like, way to ruin the fun. Congressman Jamal Bowman says capitalism is slavery by another name. No, it's not. It's the thing that has given more people more prosperity and hope than any other system, flawed though it surely is. But again, something like the free market is kind of synonymous with America. And if you don't like it, I don't know how you can say you...
Maher then shifts from campaign presentation to the worldview behind the rhetoric, telling audiences that millions of Americans fundamentally hate women may energize people who already agree, but it can also make undecided voters feel personally accused. The same problem appears when critics describe the entire capitalist system in the most extreme possible terms. There are legitimate arguments to make about monopolies, corporate influence, stagnant wages, and excessive executive compensation without declaring the entire market economy inherently oppressive. Most Americans are not looking for political leaders to destroy everything around them. They want an economy that works better and treats them fairly. Reform gives those voters a reason to participate. Sweeping condemnation can give them a reason to walk away.
Okay, how about this one? Workers can migrate free across borders. That seems like was a loser for the Democrats last time. I don't think that's going to be a winner. Or is it really even
what
the right
does it
thing
even
to do?
mean?
Open borders.
Open borders.
No, I think we need a secure border, and there's
Okay.
a place you can come in.
Okay.
That's the tale. It's a loser. Yeah.
The DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal?
The phrase, "could someone just act normal?" captures a frustration that campaign strategists ignore at their own risk. Border policy does not have to be reduced to an argument between compassion and enforcement. A country can support legal immigration, protect legitimate asylum seekers, and still maintain a functioning system for determining who enters and under what rules. Those principles only appear incompatible when political factions turn them into tests of ideological loyalty. If Democrats struggle to communicate a basic commitment to border order, Republicans can repeatedly replay that hesitation for voters. Before a candidate can explain a complicated immigration agenda, they often have to demonstrate that they understand the public's basic concern about security and enforcement.
He ran in 2020. Bernie Sanders said he would legalize marijuana on his first day as president, but that the business of selling pot would be awarded first to those who suffered most from the... And you know what? I can't argue with that instinct. The has been a horrendous instrument of prejudice and punishment for racial minorities, so it seems fair that they jump the line for franchises the way Indians did for casinos. But it's also what's holding up Republican support for legalizing nationally, which would be good for everybody. And these are the hard, practical choices the Democrats have to weigh. Redress the past, or reach out to the gettable white voter who says, you know what, I'd like a shot at getting in the pot business.
This is how a potentially popular reform can become so complicated that ordinary voters feel like they have accidentally enrolled in a graduate seminar. A broader coalition can form around legalizing marijuana, regulating the industry, collecting taxes, reducing unnecessary arrests, and redirecting law enforcement resources. But once the conversation becomes dominated by endless debates over who deserves priority, who should receive special treatment, and how every historical grievance should be addressed, the original policy can become almost impossible to recognize. Correcting past discrimination can be a legitimate objective. Pretending that every policy choice has no competing costs is something else. Sometimes an 80% solution that actually becomes law improves more lives than a perfect proposal that never survives the political process.
Chuck Schumer has been in elected office for 50 years. 1974, he was first elected. 50 years. AOC will absolutely kick his ass in a primary. She is the leader of the Democratic Party in this moment. And will continue to be, I think, the biggest driver of where the party goes from a governmental policy standpoint. And that drives many of my colleagues crazy. But the fact is, she has tapped into the base of support within the Democratic Party. And you see the juxtaposition between her and Chuck Schumer.
Then this debate is much larger than a single Senate primary. Chuck Schumer has decades of institutional experience, political connections, donors, and influence inside Washington. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has something equally powerful in modern politics: enormous attention. In the age of digital campaigning, attention can move faster than traditional political seniority ever could. But dominating a heavily Democratic primary is not the same challenge as persuading voters in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, or other competitive states. A highly energized activist base can become powerful enough to defeat moderates within its own party while still struggling to attract enough independents outside it. Winning the political clubhouse is one achievement. Winning the national stadium is another.
And who do you see on the horizon for 2028 in the Democratic primary?
Right now?
Yeah.
Bernie and AOC.
No.
They got the biggest crowds.
That doesn't matter.
It won't sustain itself, but right now they have no leader. Okay? But this is the thing the Republican Party has to understand, too. Both parties lost in the last election. Trump won, okay? And I don't know if that's going to transfer. We should have won 4 more seats in the Senate. If you looked at the last 70 races for the Senate, 69 and follow exact.
But AOC and Bernie, and who's at the top of the ticket?
They're going to lead right now.
Who's at the top of that ticket, Kev?
Maher is correct that large crowds do not automatically translate into election victories, while Kevin McCarthy's broader point is that political space rarely stays empty for long. If establishment Democrats spend years quietly discussing electability while figures such as Bernie Sanders and AOC continue traveling, fundraising, organizing supporters, and dominating online conversations, the next Democratic primary could be shaped before the mainstream wing fully realizes what happened. Outsider candidates can become front runners when their supporters are unusually loyal, their opponents are divided, and their momentum keeps growing. The challenge for moderates is not simply having voters, it is finding someone capable of turning those voters into an organized political movement.
What should have happened after that is one of the adults on stage should have told their young, loyal followers, this is not a symbol of freedom. This is. If the thought leaders in the Democratic Party keep encouraging and not rebuking the idea that America is cringe and the people who run Gaza are great, the Democrats are doomed. Alyssa Slotkin's right. Liberals are weak and woke, especially the white ones, and they indulge all sorts of nonsense from their kids, a pattern that then continues on in the Democratic Party. Last election, it was all the gender stuff, the insistence that men can have babies and such.
Maher's language may be deliberately provocative, but the underlying argument is easier to understand. A national leader cannot appear uncomfortable with the country they are asking to lead. Criticizing the United States can absolutely be part of patriotic political debate. There is a difference, however, between challenging the country's failures and appearing embarrassed by its institutions, traditions, or symbols. Voters notice who receives the loudest applause, which issues receive the strongest passion, and when candidates choose to remain silent. Leadership does not mean agreeing with every faction inside your coalition. Sometimes leadership requires telling your own supporters clearly and publicly that a particular position has gone too far.
Let's start with AOC. We know she's got a grassroots following and she's young, but we also know she has a socialist label. Defund era positions, polarizing, no executive experience, and foreign policy scrutiny.
From a Republican campaign perspective, this could look like an enormous collection of ready-made material. Modern contests leave behind years of interviews, speeches, live streams, podcasts, and social media posts. Opponents do not necessarily need to create a new narrative when an entire archive already exists. AOC would face a difficult strategic choice: move toward the center and potentially disappoint some of the activists who helped build her political brand, or maintain a harder ideological line and risk reinforcing concerns among general election voters. That is bigger than a simple messaging issue. It is a question about whether the coalition itself can expand without losing the energy that made it powerful in the first place.
All of it.
One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump also won, all moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office. Gosh, if only someone had been saying that all along. But you know, welcome home. I don't tell them they're dumb. They're not dumb. They're ignorant. There's a difference. There's a difference. There's a difference. To call someone stupid, yes, that's wrong. Stupid, you can't help because you're fucking stupid.
But calling them ignorant would be a terrible electoral strategy.
It's electoral, yes.
Electoral, yeah, you know what I meant.
Electorally,
yes.
That would be a terrible strategy.